The mystery virus started here in the city of Wuhan.
Daily, dozens of people stream to this housing office, seeking support and shelter.
Housing crisis. Unemployment in the UK has risen to its highest level for almost 2 years.
An increase in cases of domestic violence.
Our children are facing a mental health crisis.
Coronavirus
Broke out in Wuhan at the end of December.
There's now a total of around 43,000 people, that's adults and children, without a roof over their heads.
Unwelcome but expected, the coronavirus has hit the UK.
Stay at home.
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 It's affected it completely. Everything changed after the pandemic hit. We basically had 2 weeks to get everyone in, that everyone that was rough sleeping had to be accommodated.
Initially, we just shut the doors because the initial advice was nobody is to congregate, and our places of business where we work were places of congregation. So my name is Jack Geddes. I'm the marketing and fundraising manager at Glasgow City Mission. The work that Glasgow City Mission does is really split into the 3 projects we run. So we have a city centre project, which is based in the corner of Brown Street and Crimea Street. We also have the Overnight Welcome Centre, which opens for 4 months of the year, 1st December to 31st of March. And it was originally set up 11 years ago to ensure that nobody had to sleep rough in the worst of the weather. The 3rd project we have is in Govan in the south side of Glasgow. We have a child and family centre there.
My name's Shona Cowie. I work for the Simon Community Scotland and I am their storyteller in residence. We offer wraparound support, which is what is really needed to help rehabilitate people out of homelessness. People need homes, people need safe, secure housing, but that's not the answer to all of Scotland's social problems. We need wraparound care, and it's really, really ambitious and innovative that the Simon community have recognised that creativity and expression are part of that wraparound care. But yes, we support, the Simon community supports people with everything from like getting bus tickets to therapeutic processes to helping them buy their pyjamas.
My name's Andrea Middleton. I'm a support worker within the Simon Community Access Hub in Argyll Street, Glasgow. So I started volunteering with Simon Community Scotland in March of last year. The beginning of lockdown obviously was a crazy time for everybody, and I probably slightly selfishly didn't want to stay at home, but also quite unselfishly wanted to help, and I think a lot of people did just wanted to help out in any way that I could.
Here in the UK, 43 new cases were confirmed today, bringing the total to 206.
Initially, we just shut the doors because the initial advice was nobody is to congregate, and our places of business where we work were places of congregation. It wasn't just staff that congregated, all our guests congregated, with people turning up all day, all through the day, all through the evening, coming for food, coming for this, coming for that. We then started delivering food parcels, and we did that for a good long period. So we get food into our building, sanitise it, bag it, put it out, and 3 times a week our van went round and delivered to various people. At the same time this was all happening, the Overnight Welcome Centre started around on the 1st December. We cook the food for the dinners in Crimea Street. We then transport it in a heated cabinet up to the hotel that we're using, and we feed our guests from there. So the Overnight Welcome Centre itself hadn't really, apart from a bit of social distancing inside, is really the same as it has been through the years. But the other 2 main projects have just adapted as we've been able to.
It's affected it completely. Everything changed after the pandemic hit, we basically had 2 weeks to get everyone in, that everyone that was rough sleeping had to be accommodated. I'm an artist, a social artist, and so I work with a lot of people who could be called vulnerable. I am a key worker, and so one of the few artists that are considered a key worker, so I'm able to visit residencies, socially distanced, of course, and I might work with people one-on-one that are experiencing mental distress or just need someone to talk to. So it's very important that I'm not a therapist and they don't see me like somebody that's there to solve their problems. You can imagine that people that are homeless, their lifestyles are often very chaotic. So they don't have the same relationship with tech that we might. So that was really hard. But finally, we did manage to get a project going on Zoom. And it was really beautiful because it's almost even more intimate. The screen, I can get like really, really close and be sitting here, and the person with me is sitting right up at the screen, sort of listening. So we could get even closer than we would in person. And sometimes I would be one woman was having a really, really hard day. For all the reasons that you might expect. And she decided she wanted to do the session in bed. So I sat on my bed at home with my Zoom, and she sat on her bed, wrapped up in her clothes. And that's not appropriate in day-to-day life, but for some reason in this circumstance, it felt totally appropriate, and we did bedtime stories.
What we're seeing now, part of my role is in the Access Hub as a support worker. Since we opened our doors in October, we started supporting up to about 90 people a day. That was during social distancing. In fact, we still are supporting sometimes those numbers of people, and that's with social distancing in place, limiting people coming into the buildings.
Well, there's two stories that have come out of the pandemic for the homeless situation, I think. There's people that have never experienced homelessness before, or maybe have a more stable lifestyle now, that have found that they're back in a homeless situation because of insecure tenancy, because of the minimised income, because of mental health, because of the higher risks of domestic violence. People might have found themselves homeless that otherwise wouldn't have. But the other story is people that were already homeless have actually, a lot of people have been able to make their way out of homelessness for good because of the hotel system that came into play. So if you can imagine, people in Scotland generally don't sleep on the streets because of our policies, but they still have to stay in temporary accommodation and hostels and bed and breakfasts. It's still not a stress-free environment. And all of those people were given a safe space to sleep with a hotel room, clean, with their own key, which meant that they didn't have to keep one eye open, so they could sleep better. So they had a shower and a bath, and they had a TV. They could go for a jog and come home and get clean and then sit and watch the telly. And all of this stuff just minimises the stress, gives people a bit of a break, and meant that a lot of people who otherwise wouldn't have made their way out of homelessness. So everything's changed for the good and for the better.
The pandemic's had a huge effect on us, and it's interesting because we have learned a lot. A lot of things have advanced very quickly. The fact that we had people in hotels for the overnight welcome centre is incredible, because the previous 10 years they were on the floor in a hall, sleeping cheek by jowl in mattresses. Now you clearly can't do that with COVID around. So they now have their own room, ensuite, television. I mean, the dignity that's afforded now is so much better. It was somewhere we always wanted to get to, but actually the pandemic had a positive effect on that journey and brought it right up to date. So what we are conscious of are not throwing away the good things that have actually come out of this. Actually, as I mentioned about the overnight welcome centre, the government has put a bit of money behind ensuring that more people are accommodated, even if it's in a hotel. They did that through lockdown. There were various hotels around Glasgow, and we were in the situation where there was next to nobody sleeping rough in Glasgow. And of course, what that does is it then begs the question, why couldn't we do that before? Then it begs the second question, are you going to continue this after COVID?
Scotland has become the first country in the world to make female sanitary products free. It means the authorities have a legal duty to ensure items such as tampons and sanitary pads are available without charge to anyone who needs them.
We run projects like period-friendly poverty, so we think it's really important that people that have periods can do so with dignity. And there's a lot of missing information and education around that. So we make sure that I think there's 400 and something period points across Glasgow that anyone can access, which just means they have loads of sanitary towels and tampons and everything you need. I think we need to have a look at female homelessness. In 2018, at the end of 2018, there was a new government document written up about the strategy to end homelessness. And it didn't mention female specific homeless circumstances. So the reasons that men and women usually get into homelessness are different, and the vulnerabilities are both extreme, but they're both different. So it's really important that we personalise the agendas from the government's point of view. And the Simon community are working really hard with the government to make sure that we do look at these people's stories and people as individuals and not just the homeless. There was one I found it really interesting when I first started with the charity, talking to a guy who we ended up talking about feminism, and he said, I'm not a feminist. But his job is he's a street team member, so he's the one that's walking the streets looking for people that are in a very vulnerable position, and he wouldn't finish his shift until if he meets a young girl who's 16, until they've been accommodated that night and are safe for the night, and then will be passed on to the appropriate services. He wouldn't finish his shift, and he'd be the person that at 3 a.m. would drive to Tesco's to get like a toothbrush and new pajamas for a mum fleeing a domestic violence situation. For me, that's frontline feminism.
So the street team do really important outreach work. They're based within the hub, the new hub in Argyll Street. They go out in teams of 2 quite often. They're made up with a member of staff and also a volunteer, and they really just meet people where they are. Not everybody wants to engage, but those who do want to engage, they'll just find out what the issues are, what they can help with, if they can signpost them to casework to get them in accommodations.
Even in normal times, 1 in 4 people experience a mental health problem every year. And the charity SANE warns that in lockdown conditions, more trouble is brewing.
The link between mental health and homelessness is very bound together. It's very hard if anybody's experienced mental health problems to get anything done to kind of function normally. So trying to move into a better place, a more stable living circumstance when your head's not in it, it's almost impossible. It's very deeply wound in with early trauma, and then all the trauma that happens when you're living on the street or living in insecure tenancy and violent situations, or just when you lose your job. That's traumatic. I think it's always going to be there, and it's not about solving with a magic wand. It's something that we're going to have to take slowly and gently and just get better and better at talking about.
Do I think we can attain the goal of eradicating homelessness, and how would be achieved? There would be an argument that there will always be somebody who finds himself on the street very unexpectedly. And it could be that there's a relationship breakdown and somebody leaves the house at 9 o'clock at night and literally they don't know where to go, right? So, and effectively from that point they're homeless. So we need all of us in the sector recognise that type of thing will happen. So there will be a need for services ongoing. However, COVID has shown that with the right will, that we can start dealing in a positive manner with the issue. We can house people temporarily. The next thing is getting these folks proper support and then into accommodation.
I foresee following lockdown and the end of coronavirus, I do foresee that truthfully that it's going to get better. It hopefully can only get better for people.
I think with the way that things have run, people are not going to accept it as much anymore. I think it's harder and harder to walk past people that are suffering and just accept that as normal. I think our mentality as a nation has shifted.